Hello everyone. In today's video, I will show you how to create this breathtaking portrait of the northern lights reflecting over a lake in Procreate. We'll paint together step by step, and I'll guide you through my techniques to bring this stunning night scene to life. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced artist, these tips will help elevate your skills. So get comfortable, pour yourself a drink, and let's get started. All the brushes and the canvases I'm using will be found in the description below. You can also download the free sketch and the color palettes to make it even easier. For today's demonstration, I'll be using the Rough Groove canvas, but feel free to use any canvas you prefer. We'll focus on the bigger areas like the background, the trees, the mountains, and the lake. And the sketch is already imported onto my canvas, which is going to be underneath the watercolor texture canvas effect. And all the paintings will be underneath that sketch and the watercolor texture canvas. And today I'll be using the dark wood texture postcard effect. You can choose the marble or the light wood, but I decided to go with the darker color tone to really enhance that look of the northern lights. These are only available in the Line and Wash watercolor brush set, as well as the Ultimate Watercolor Brush Set bundle. And now we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to drag it underneath that sketch so we can paint, so we can see what we're painting over. You don't necessarily need the background for the postcard effect, but it does enhance that overall look and bring the realism to the painting that we have. And as you can see, we'll follow along all the color palettes that we'll be using today. So we'll start with the first tone color, which is going to be a dark cyan color. And we're going to start with the flat brush to paint the larger areas of the background. And we'll focus on 3 layers. The darkest tones on the top will create an illusion of a deep sky, as it transitions to a lighter tone in the mountain lines. Atmosphere effect, making it more distant, appearing softer and more faded. So we'll put the dark tone on the top, going left and right just like this, filling about 1/3 of the top. And then we'll pick this next tone color that's going to be a little bit lighter in cyan blue, filling in the center like this. And if you are enjoying with our tutorials, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, where you'll be notified when new videos are released. Now we're going to add the lightest cyan blue here, at the bottom, just above the mountain lines like this. And with that layer selected, we're going to use the moving blender and increase the size to 100%. And we're going to keep the opacity and the size at 100%. And we're going to start from the left and make our way across the right, wiggling around, filling the areas, giving a nice, smooth surface. Now we'll work on the tree lines on the right side. So we're going to create a new layer now. And again, we're going to pick this dark tone color that we first used. And we're going to pick on the wet on wet brush, keeping the size to around 25% and 100% opacity. The wet on wet brush will create a light, misty gradient. And to create evergreens, we're going to start from the top, thicker lines as we go down, wiggling left and right, while we slowly paint the areas to the bottom piece. Mimicking this natural tapered structure makes it look a lot more organic and proportional. It is going to be pressure sensitive, so when you're at the top, we're going to put less pressure, and as we go down, we want thicker areas, so we're going to put a lot more pressure. This will give a natural spreading, much more fuller look in the lower branches. And to have a more even line, I'm not going to release my pen and continue painting just like this. If you do let go of the pen from the screen, it will have a slight transparent effect with overlaying, which is fine because we can go back and blend the colors together. But to make this painting quick and fun, I'm going to continue on, so we can skip that process. Simply put, we're doing this with a simple single stroke. And we're just going to go along the lines underneath the person that's going to be standing on the edge. And while our pen is still on the screen, we can actually increase the size, which will allow us to fill the areas quicker. Now I have to move the screen to the left, so it's going to have a slight overlay, but it's fine. You'll barely notice the overlaying effect. So I'm going to reduce the size to around 50%. We can concentrate in the smaller areas of the sprox here, and fill in the bottom pieces just like this. Now we'll focus on the rocks, keeping the size to around 8% and just filling them out like this. And to enhance that look, we're going to duplicate that layer that we just created. And we're going to combine them by using our 2 fingers and pinching them just like this. This will make the tree lines a lot more thicker and darker pigment. Now let's focus on making the mountains in the background. So we're going to create a new layer. And we'll start with the first dark tone color of gray that we can find, keeping the size to around 35%, 100% opacity using the wet on wet brush. We'll start off by drawing a line across the mountain lines and the lake. And to make things more interesting, we're going to start with the front of the mountains with darker pigments, and the bigger mountain on the back is going to have a lighter tone as it is but more faded. So we're going to create a new layer and put that layer underneath the layer that we just created because the mountain is in the back. And we're going to pick this lighter gray tone color and fill in the rest of the mountain just like this. I like to paint along the lines of the outline first and then fill in the general areas in the center. And now we're going to add some shadows in the mountains here. So we're going to create a new layer and pick this black tone color here and use the wet on dry brush, keeping the opacity to around 55% and size to around 50% size. And as you can see, I have made some sketches around the center here to create a bit more depth and some shadows, giving a bit more character and realism to the mountain. And I try to make this painting fun, fast, and easy to do. So I kept things simple. And we can make the mountain look great even with small lines just across coming down like this. Almost like the mountain has some wrinkles, creating a bit more mystery and some texture. Now we'll focus on making the northern lights. So we're going to create a new layer and pick this emerald green with a slighter pinch of blue. And we're going to use the gouache brush and keeping the opacity 100% and size as well. So we do have the sketch, but it's going to be a little bit darker. So let's go to that layer that we just painted for the background, and we can tap the letter N, which will bring the opacity, and we're going to reduce it to around 75%. So we can see a little bit more of the sketch in the background, so we can follow along the lines like this, waving left and right. And we're going to stop halfway and work on the left side as well. The northern lights is going to have a slight fading effect as it is going away from us, so the lines are going to be looking a bit thinner. We can reduce the size to around 50% and continue along the lines. And reduce it a bit more to around 10%, almost as if the mountain is smoking of emerald smoke from a far distance. And do the same thing to around 50%, and then we go down a little bit closer to the mountains, it's going to around 10%. And we'll focus on the next color, which is going to be a light blue tone color. We're going to draw the same lines, but we're going to put it on top of the emerald colors. And because the colors are going to be on top, the layers are going to zigzag like this. As a northern light bends, it's going to twist with almost like a curtain wind effect, allowing the green to be at the most bottom piece, and the blues and the purples are going to fade upwards. It's almost like you're underneath looking upwards in the curtain. And the most bottom piece of the curtain is going to be the green emerald color. And we can achieve this by zigzagging. And we can reduce the size to around 35% to focus on the smaller areas as it fades. Matching the same tone colors and the size, just like the greens. And we're going to do the same thing to the left. Now we're going to pick this purple tone color, keeping the size to around 80%, and putting that layer on top of the blue that we put it. I was inspired to do this painting a couple of months ago, where we were actually able to see some northern lights where we live in the southern parts of Canada. It is very rare to see, especially when the weather conditions have to be perfect with clear skies like this. Now with the layer that we just created with the northern lights, we're going to keep that layer selected and we're going to go onto the top left corner, click on the adjustment tools, and we're going to click on the Gaussian blur. We're going to tap the screen while holding it and dragging it to the right to around 8%. This will mix in the colors, making it a bit more blurrier. Now we're going to go back to that layer of the background and darken it how we had it before. Now go back to that layer that we have painted the northern lights. Now we're going to use the regular blender, keeping the size to around 50%, and we're just going to flick them up. Pushing the blues upwards with the purple, dragging some of the green up. We're mainly focusing on the purples and the blues, allowing the green to be the base of the bottom piece. And we're going to do the same thing on the left side. Now to enhance that green and make it more dramatic, we're going to create a new layer on top of the layer that we have for the northern lights and pick this bright electric green. And we're going to use a default brush from Procreate, the light brush under the luminous libraries, keeping the size to around 20%, opacity at 100%. And we're just going to put a small light tone, putting some light pressures on the most bottom piece of the greens. And we're going to reduce the size around 10% as it slowly fades. Rather than making it so even, we're going to break that glowing effect in smaller pieces, allowing the northern lights to look a bit more natural, revealing its beautiful brightness randomly across the sky. And now we'll focus on painting the layer of the lake. We're going to create a layer, but it's going to be at the most bottom layer, using the flat brush. Now we'll pick this emerald color to fill in the lake, keeping the opacity at 100% and size to around 60% behind the tree lines and the mountains. And now we're going to create a new layer, emerald color that we use for the northern lights, which will be our natural reflection from the sky. And this time we'll use the smooth wash brush. And since there's two lines across the sky of the northern lights, we're going to do the same thing, but it's going to be spreading apart. But it's going to look a lot wider when it's closer towards the rocks. And we're going to create a new layer and pick that blue tone color and mix in some of that blue with the greens, just like this. Random areas, it doesn't have to be perfectly put. We're just going to put it randomly across the lake. And we'll add the purple tone now, putting in the outside edges as it is fading away. Now we're going to use our two fingers and pinch the tones that we just created together. Pinch them and combine them together, and we're going to use the regular blender and zoom in, keeping it sized to around 20%, and we're just going to drag left and right, tapping the screen just like this. We're going to increase the size to around 30%, and keep mixing, pushing and dragging some of the colors. And we're going to create a new layer and pick the star tone color that we used before. And we're going to pick the rough wash brush, keeping the opacity to around 60%. And we're going to cast a shadow underneath the mountains. As the northern lights now brightening out the lake, the mountain is going to cover some of the light. So we're going to draw across the lines like this, showing a nice reflection. When the height of the mountain is increased, we're going to increase the depth of the shadows like this. About half the size of the mountain. We're going to use the moving blender, keeping the size around 30%, and we're just going to give them a slight blend. We're going to zoom in and we're going to create a new layer. It just has to be a layer on top of the lake that we just created. And pick this dark tone color that we have used before, using the fine line brush, keeping the size to around 25%, opacity 100%, and we're just going to draw along the lines like this. Shows that the person is looking at the lake, admiring the beauty of the northern lights. Wearing some shoes at the bottom, and a slight backpack that it's wearing. Enjoying the view after a long hike. And we're just going to fill in the centers, just like this. Now we're going to make a small trail leading the hiker to the center of the painting. So we're going to create a new layer and pick this tone color that's going to be a light gray tone color. And we're going to use the wet on wet brush. So if you can't see the sketch, we can reduce the tree line by going back to the layers that we used, tapping the letter N and reducing the opacity to around 65% so we can slightly see the sketch. And we're going to keep the opacity at 100% and size to around 50%. And starting from the left and to the center, and to the right, and back to the center. It gives a bit more character, and it will naturally lead the viewer's eyes to the center of the painting, to the person standing, admiring the lake, and then as we look up, it's going to show the beautiful northern lights. Now we're going to create a new layer. Underneath the layers of the northern lights, pick this white tone color, and we're going to use the flick brush, keeping the size to around 20%, and we're just going to randomly put in the areas going left and right of the stars. And we'll put some of that sprinkle of the flicks, about 5% size, keeping the opacity to around 50% and sprinkling some of the stars in the lake with slight reflections from the skies. And I wanted to give a nice single shooting star across the sky. So pick this light emerald tone color. Pick the fine line brush, keeping the opacity 100% and size 25%. And we're going to make a small circle and then flick it with a tapering effect, capturing that beautiful moment of the shooting star across the sky. Now all we have to do is now locate the sketch layer, and we're going to tap the check mark, which will remove it. There we have it. Beautiful, scenic northern lights looking across the lake. If you enjoyed this tutorial and want to continue painting with me, click on the next video and I'll see you there.